Hey there, welcome to the Friendly Ties podcast. In this episode, we're talking about a board game in particular, and that one is Dead Reckoning. I'm joined with my friends Nick and Anastasia. We've played this one a bunch recently, and we have a lot to say about it. Speaking of that, though, there's a lot going on with this game, like a whole bunch of rules and interesting systems for sure, but we are not going to be teaching you how to play the game today in this podcast. It just would not work. I do want to say that I made a sponsored tutorial video for this game when it went up on Kickstarter that uses a prototype, but it still teaches the game like 99% correctly. So I'll put a link to that in the description of this episode, and we'll try to give you some context as we go, but fair warning, we're not teaching all of the rules. So at a ridiculously high level, this is a card crafting sandbox style game. It's the same, made by the same designer as Mystic Vale, and it uses the same system where players have a deck of cards that have sleeves, and instead of swapping out your cards, you upgrade your cards by sliding transparent cards into your sleeves. In Dead Reckoning, you do a whole bunch of other stuff. You sail a ship around the seas, you explore and find new stuff. You are going to fight each other by tossing things into a cube tower. You'll also be picking up and delivering and making achievements, and there's just a lot going on here. So over the course of the last week, we've played this game a whole bunch. I liked my first play of it, and then I played it a second time, and I still really enjoyed it while also being kind of frustrated by it. There's a lot of very cool moments in this game. Like the crafting, like that's the backbone of this game, right? Putting cards together, trying to make combos that seem imbalanced. Sometimes they can kind of feel that way, but maybe somebody let you get there. I like this game when I'm playing it, but there's a lot of downtime too, right? I mean, we played a 3-player game and then a 2-player game. Those are my two experiences. And even in the 2-player game, when you're not taking your turn, there's a lot of stuff that's happening for other people.
This is the perfect Friendly Ties kind of podcast topic game, right? Because it's
for sure.
I feel exactly the same way, right? Like there's a lot of stuff I really dig about this game. I don't play a game 3 times in a week, and I'm like, no, I'm not so sure about it, right? Like, I was into it.
Especially like a 2-ish hour game, right?
Oh yeah, this is not a short game. Yeah.
Right. And it has its problems. So it's cool to look at like the stuff that really stands out as unique and fun and also tear apart the things that are just like just don't work for me, right?
Yeah.
It's been a long time, actually, since we got this animated in our Discord, like, about a game.
Yeah.
Like, I was reminding me, like, how we felt about Ark Nova or Anna or, like, some of those games that we played. We were just like, go. Like, every time we play, even if you weren't playing it, it was like, well, you better get on chat and, like, explain your entire play so that, everyone can take it apart.
You two played yesterday, and I was out at lunch, and then I looked at my phone after lunch, and it was like 25 messages. And it was just you two talking about this game.
I gotta
Yeah, we played a couple nights ago, Anastasia and me, and then the moment the game was over, I couldn't help it. I took screenshots and sent them to Nick, and it was like a session report. So like, Nick needs to know what happened in this play.
Yeah. Look at my cards. Look what I did. Look at the things that came together. I mean, it's definitely that kind of game. It's the kind of game that you want to explore and you feel like you're exploring it. Like I was saying to Nick, we sat down. So we've played it once 3-player, and I played it 2-player with each of you. And Nick, we played it 2-player twice, actually.
Yeah, a whole bunch of 2-player games.
Which was funny because we didn't even think it would be good at 2-player, right? Like we were like, I don't know.
It was a worry, yeah.
Yeah, because there's an area control component here in the game. Like John said, like a very high level, there's all these things going on, the card crafting, and there's islands to explore. You really do feel like pirates. I got to give it that, like 100%. But we were worried that the 2-player game that there's also I don't know, you guys have played a bunch of 4X games and I haven't. So I barely understand the sort of like what all the X's are, but I do understand that conflict is part of them, taking over things is part of them, and both of those things don't seem like they'd be very good at 2. But the more we've played it at 2, the more I think we keep kind of going back to it. I'm like, oh wait, no, I kind of like it here. I kind of want to. We sat down to play a game yesterday, and Nick and I were like, yeah, let's just play that again. Like, let's just see. Like, let's just you just want to keep going into it.
Yeah.
I'm eager. I'm still concerned that 2-player doesn't quite work. I'm eager to play it at 3 again now that all of us have a little bit more sense of what we're doing. I really want to play it at 4. I also really don't want to play it at 4 because I don't want to be sitting there for a really long time. But
Yeah.
but I do want to see what the game experience is like at 4 because I feel, to your point exactly, Anastasia, like the fighting aspect of the game I think opens up when there's more people on the board. The area control. I went into this in Cape May, and I think I'm like learning now that I just don't love area control. If it is not the flagship, that's a wrong choice of words, a third party theme game.
Perfect.
If it's not the flagship like point of a game, like El Grande is an area control game. I like El Grande, but this is a game that has area control. It isn't fundamentally area control, and I'm learning that I just am maybe not that much of a fan of that, especially not at 2 players.
Although it does do some nice balancing for that at 2, but not enough. I think we all agree. Like the area, if you don't like area control, that it's a piece of this, right? Like it's, I mean, and John, you don't mind, you've said actively you don't like area control, but then you didn't mind it so much in this one, right?
Yeah, that is true. I tend to not like area control, even when it is the flagship mechanic in a game, for one reason or another. I've never played El Grande. Someday that'll happen, I'm sure. That's a merit badge I want to get.
Before your time, young one.
Yeah. But with my 2 plays of this one so far, I'm going to kind of speak for Nick for a moment, and he'll probably come in here, because I know that when we played our very first play, you were worried, Nick, that area control was important, but also not important in this game. Like, you got a whole bunch of points, and you didn't even for area control, and you didn't even really pay attention to it. In that first play, I focused on it. I wasn't even a pirate in our first game. I never took a cannon. I never attacked anything. I was completely passive, just influencing islands, which is the area control, making stuff on them, doing pick up and deliver, just going back and forth, getting points, and I ended up winning by a slim margin. And then in the second game that I played, it was 2 players with Anastasia, and I was like, I'm going to try something different. And I just built a bunch of guns in my boat. I upgraded all my cards with guns, and and I sunk Anastasia. I sunk like 4 merchant ships.
Not bitter.
And I still, to the point that I'm making for Nick, I still made about the same amount of victory points on the area control, even though in that second game I never upgraded for putting the influence down, which is the way you vie for it. And you know, to finish talking for you, Nick, that was like your main issue with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, you've got it basically. Like in the last game Anastasia and I played, both of us essentially didn't really compete for cubes. We just kind of like did our other things that we were doing in this game, and I'm really glad that we tried that. And it felt like you were most rewarded for just like, oh, I just dropped a little cube over here, a little cube over here, just kind of like being around and being like, don't forget about me, guys. And
yeah.
like that's intelligent play, but it's not terribly fun or interesting, or it doesn't like generate much of a narrative, except for like I just ran over and like put my pirate flag on this island, I guess. It was like, I've been here. Nick was here. And then yeah, there are aspects of the area control that I do really like in this game, though, that I think are nice. So one thing that this game has is a neutral player that you have to compete with, which I think is good for that criticism that I'm levying of like just poop a guy somewhere and move on with your life. But the thing that I actually like most is once you take control of an island, you get a freebie permanent extra control marker, which is really nice because you get rewarded for controlling things early, whereas in a lot of these area control games it's like just wait and see is really the strategy. And that is cool. I do like that aspect of it.
Also, it leads into the theme of the story a little bit. You're like, oh, look at that cube there, way back when I controlled that island before everybody else came here and went crazy.
Yeah and I think that like I think that part of it, the leave behind cube aspect, is actually what I'm sort of ambivalent on area control. I see your guys' criticisms. I'm also like, it's a game mechanic that I put up with. Like, it's fine. But I think that leave behind mechanism is actually what I really like about it, because I don't like people kicking over my sandcastle. I don't think that comes at any surprise.
Says the sandcastle kicker.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about game one. I've got my cubes on an island.
He just like will not let that go. And I feel like in a game like this, when you've gone to a bunch of effort to take control of an island and then someone comes over like Nick did yesterday and takes over your island from you, it's like you still get a little reward for it. And so I know I'm just restating what you said, but it's that feeling of like the effort I put in wasn't wasted, especially in a game like this where there is battling. Your ship can get sunk. You can lose things as you go along. There is some randomness, but there's still like this very strong Euro core. Like you really feel like you're building something. And maybe you guys are going to tell me other 4X games feel like this too, but like I really, more than I felt in, John, what was that game we played that took like 6 hours and you're in space and you're like...
That was Eclipse, second Dawn for the Galaxy.
Got it. Okay. That was fun. It took 6 hours. I don't know if I ever need to play it again. And I felt more in Dead Reckoning like I was building this thing I was really proud of. Really what I was building was like my deck of cards and their like little abilities. But it's cool that you can do that in 2 hours and you feel really like it's just tight. But as you guys talked about, I feel like you have to focus a little bit on everything and do a couple of paths really well. And that is a little bit hard for me. And I'm curious what you guys think about this, where like you do have to like drop cubes on every island, it seems, to compete. And you can't completely ignore the military, but then you also, part of the fun of the game is just like focusing on a strategy, like picking one or two cards or two strategy like that you're going to like build up, that you're going to kind of go at, and how to balance all of that. I'm not even making sense because I don't even quite have my brain wrapped around it. It's not like Great Western Trail where you could just be like, I'm going to do a cowboy strategy, and you can do that pretty successfully without really focusing on anything else. Like in this game, it feels like it wants you to focus on a couple of things and do that well, but you also can't ignore everything else. And where I've lost every game I played against you guys, and where in some cases by a very small margin, like 1 point. But it feels like that's a thing I'm kind of trying to wrap my mind around. I don't know. Make more sense of that for me, guys.
I'm with you. I actually love that you say that. It makes total sense to me. That the game wants you to do a lot of things. Part of that, I think, is because of the way you draw the cards in your deck, right? You can only essentially like keep so many cards in your hand, which means that you have to play the rest of them. So you can never get rid of cards in this game. So it's like you have to select these actions. Like you have to drop cubes in this game. You're going to be doing these other things. So like you can ignore one or two facets of the game, but fundamentally you're going to have to like interact with the majority of it. And I like that. I like games that demand your attention to be in different places. And you're like, all right, I acknowledge that I have to deal with this over here, or at least get some points from this system. But really, this is where I'm making my money. I think that's fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is not it should come as no surprise. This is not a multiplayer solitaire game. You are really paying attention to what other people are doing. And, to bring back to that first game where I did like literally completely ignore the aggressive part of the game. To a certain extent, I was allowed to do that because you two were just in each other's faces. It was great, like for me, like to see you were beating each other up on islands,
let's be
removing
clear.
influence.
I was doing none of that. Nick was over. I had no pirates.
If I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure Anastasia shot first.
Yes.
I did not. I did not.
So I was just passively hanging out in the western part of the ocean the whole game long. Neither of you two came into my area. Neither of you competed with me for islands. And you were just shooting each other, sinking each other, fighting each other for influence. And honestly, I was thinking I was going to run away with the game because that's kind of a thing in board games, right? 3-player game, 2 people beat each other up. The other person just, runs away with it. And I didn't. I won by like 3 points, like 93 to 90 or something like that. So I was surprised at how competitive all the other stuff was. But that was also just our first game. And then when we played the second game, and this is going to speak, I think, a little bit to Anastasia's incentives, because this has happened before. Anastasia does not like getting her sandcastle kicked over, as she just said. Anastasia wants to stop other people from kicking over her sandcastle. So Anastasia frequently buys guns in games when sandcastles can get kicked over, kind of as a defense thing. But then what I found, this happened once when we played Through the Ages too. She was so scared that other people were going to beat her with military that she became just this horrifying military monster that, you know, subjugated the rest of the world. And, you know, when we played that second game of Dead Reckoning, the first advancement Anastasia took was a card that let her fight me. Because that's the thing. Normally, you can't fight each other. You need to be allowed to. There's like a, you know, a special icon. And literally the first card she took was, let me fight John. And I was like, okay, all right. And so the first card I took had a couple cannons on it. And then like the second card she took was the other thing that let her fight me. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take some more cannons because apparently Anastasia's coming for me.
The
but
Cold
then
War
like
escalation is real.
Yeah, it was a Cold War escalation. And then we got like a third of the way through the game and suddenly I had a hand with all these cannons. I was like, I'm going to go sink that merchant. And then like halfway through the game, Anastasia's like, it's time to fight John because I think I'd taken a couple damage from a merchant. She thought I was weak and I wasn't. And I dropped down like 2 cards with 1,000,000 guns on them. And from that point on, I was the aggressor. I went crazy on guns. I became the terror in that game. And my last turn, I hunted you down in the port and annihilated your ship. By throwing like 15 cubes into this cube tower. The combat's wonderful in this game. You all toss simultaneously cubes into this tower, which looks like a ship. It's like broadside cannons, and then they fly out onto a board, and you get stuff. But anyway, so I felt like I was pushed into destroying you.
Okay, hold on. I want to be perfectly clear about something here, okay?
Let's hear your side.
For anybody who wants to do this, defend your sandcastle strategy, it doesn't work. It just fails every time for all the reasons John is saying, because I am so good at buying stuff to defend myself, but I apparently, for some reason, am not very good. Probably because I just don't like it in games. I've never liked attacking in games. I'm not very good at executing with that attack, or I just have really terrible luck with this, you know, cube dice. Nick keeps calling it dice rolling, but it's not dice rolling because it reminds you of dice rolling, right? Like it's cube dropping tower thing, which is super fun, but it's totally luck based. And my point here is that I had zero intention of attacking John. I had zero intent. All I wanted to do was exist in my corner of the world, and I didn't want you to come take it from me. And then I was perfectly happy destroying all the merchant ships, but no, you had to go destroy them first. And Nick did the same thing yesterday. I was like, fine, I'm going to do super hard military in this game. And I went and I was like, I'm just going to fight all the merchant ships. And then Nick had to go block them all. Like, what were you? Why? Why did you have to do that?
It's because I'm evil to play 2-player games with. Like, that's really more of a reflection of that. I actually do think that is more interesting in a 4-player game, I suspect.
100%.
Because you can't have as much, like, as me being like, I'm going to attack this merchant ship so you can't. Like, that's like a ridiculous thought process that only exists in a 2-player game.
And that actually is one of my critiques of the game, is just that in a 2-player game, this element of military, like, John, you're totally right. Like, there's a Cold War, like, I don't know, we didn't do any military.
Especially at 2 players.
Especially at 2 players. But honestly, I think that would be the case at any player count, because now that we've played it a bunch, there's no way I'm not going, despite what I just said, there's no way I'm not going to buy a bunch of military to try to protect myself against one of you going rogue and trying to, like, come for me. And that is inherently going to force you guys to build up military. Like, there's no way I'm going to ignore military the more we play this game. And I haven't been, even if it hasn't been all that successful. But in a 2-player game, like, it is, you know, I do feel like the achievements promote military. Military is obviously one of the X's in the 4X. And there's a lot of stuff that promotes military. And I have tried to go harder on it now in like 1.5 games, and I would say that there, especially in 2-player, there's not enough stuff to fight. There isn't enough ships, other people to fight. There's like, unless you really want to chase, like my plan in the game I played with Nick yesterday was just chase Nick around the board until I destroyed him. And that just like didn't work because for reasons that Nick is very
because
good.
I hid. Because I hid.
And there's a lot of ocean to hide in, and no one else is forcing him to move.
I just went home and I was like, please protect me, mommy. I need someone here. And then they pointed the cannons in the fort at you. The big bad mean pirate ship is coming for me, you know.
I had all this stuff to fight, and I was just like floating around an empty ocean, being like, what can I destroy?
Come at me.
I mean, that's a bit of luck, though, right? Like when we played our 2-player game and I went crazy on military, I sunk 4 merchant ships, and you didn't fight any merchant ships in that game, but you like traded with them, which made them go away. So we saw like 6 merchant ships over the course of that game, and I think that's the same amount of merchant ships that I suspect anyway that you've seen in like every other play of this you've had combined.
I think you call the merchant ships forward in the deck somehow because Nick and I have seen none of them. I think you have a special connection with them, and
so I think
forward.
I just got kind of lucky. You know, I went crazy guns, and then there was all these targets, and I ended up targeting you on the very last turn. But like, there were a couple times where I was like, which merchant do I want to destroy? And that was kind of luck of the draw. Like you pull these merchants, they're kind of advancements. You pull them out of the deck. The ocean is essentially the market. Like if you've played a deck building game like Ascension before, or something like that, you know, with a scrolling market of cards you can buy, the ocean is essentially that. So you're essentially doing area control and pick up and deliver on top of the card market, which is very cool from a mechanical perspective. But, you know, again, there's luck of the draw there.
Okay, well, while we're here talking about combat, I actually want to talk about my favorite part of the design of this game with combat. John, a while ago, mentioned that in that first game, he felt like he was going to crush us because the two of us were slapping each other back and forth. And it's true.
Yeah.
Like, we already talked about like how in the area control, like you're still going to score points, you know, if you're second place. So like, yes, we are hurting each other. John did win that game, right? But we're still getting points for doing that. And the combat is actually like that too. Getting sunk really sucks because you have to pay your 5 coins to the other player or whatever. But just fighting someone, even if they beat you, even if you take some consequences for it, when you throw those cubes in the tower, you're going to get some free rewards. You're going to get some money. You're going to get some plunder. And so everybody that gets engaged in a fight gets something. And so like as in this game, when you are getting smacked down by someone overtaking your island with area control or by someone coming and shooting you in the face, both times you are still getting some, at the very least, consolation prize along the way, which I think serves to tighten up that like if your sandcastle's getting kicked down, the game is like it's okay. Like we've got your back still, and it keeps you competitive in the game. I think it's pretty hard to like kill someone in this game, right? Like just like completely knock them off the board if you're playing, you know, with some semblance of paying attention to things. And I think that's a great part of the design.
Yeah, I mean, if your ship gets sunk, all you lose is points. Like even if you have cargo, which is like the currency that you spend to get stuff, you keep all your cargo, and you probably just got cargo. Like, because you said, like, every cube that gets thrown into that tower is going to do something. It's going to either damage the opponent, which is good. It's going to help you win the battle, which is good. It's going to give you a coin, or it's going to give you a barrel, which you can spend on things. Or it'll, you know, get re-rolled with more cubes. So, yeah, like, I mean, in that last play, Anastasia had that one ill-fated attack on me, and I happened to have all these guns in my hand. I got a whole bunch of stuff, you know, even though it wasn't my turn. And then a really peculiar thing about this game is like I played the cards with the guns on them on Anastasia's turn, but then when it was my turn, that card is still technically in play and I could use it. So I had all these guns out, so I was like, well, I guess I'm going to go fight that merchant over there because I've already committed to playing these guns. I mean, in the last action when I sunk you, Anastasia, in that game, you still got, like I stole 5 points from you, but you still got probably at least 3 or 4 points worth of stuff from the defending cubes that you tossed into that tower.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Nick. I love that mechanic. I love that you get all of this plunder. I love that you don't have that feeling of like, oh, I just wasted all this effort on this battle and I got nothing out of it. I mean, that's one of the reasons I don't like a lot of the games that have battle in them, because it doesn't matter how much I add to my dice. Like, you know, I at the end of the day, it's complete luck. And so is this, right? It's complete luck how these cubes are going to come out of this dice tower. But the fact that in that particular play, John, I had a card that actually benefited the resource, you know, the barrels, which is the one resource in this game other than gold. and that I had a card that gave me points for that. So you attacking me, even though we figured it out that you attacking me in that game is how you won, because I only lost by like 3 points, which is also kind of nuts that this game can come down to, in all of our plays, except for the one yesterday, even the first one, it all came down to like 1 point between me and Nick, 3 points between, like, the game is so tight.
Very close scores.
Yeah, which is actually something I want to talk about more in a second. But it's, nevertheless, the fighting, getting the stuff, and the fact that I remember asking you guys like 15 times whether or not you could take my barrels off my ship, and then I could, like, those are like protected, that there just isn't.
Yeah, you were like, really worried.
I was, because the resources
it's
are
like,
really...
no, your barrels are fine. I can't touch them.
Yeah, and because, in this ocean mechanic, you'll go out to the deep ocean and you need those barrels to buy cards, and you can't pick them up unless you fight, and then they actually do come onto your boat. So actually getting in a fight can also be good. Like, you could get damaged, but you might get the resources you need because in that battle you were able to pick them up. It's one of the, I don't want to say trickier mechanics, but it definitely adds this complexity of that pick up and deliver of, like, a lot of the resources that you make at your home port. And so, like, you can only take so much with you, and it slows you down, and you can only add things kind of like where your resources are generated, whether they're on the islands you're on or whether they're on your home port, is a bit of a puzzle in and of itself. And battle is one of the ways to kind of like short circuit that puzzle, which I really enjoy. It's very thematic.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like when we first Nick taught the game, when we first taught it, I was like, oh gosh, this game's going to be too combative for me, like too in your face, too interactive. But I remember after that first battle that happened in the first game, I wasn't in it, but between the two of you, I think the person who lost was like, oh, that wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
I got this, I got that. Nobody got sunk even in that first battle.
It's
it was like,
hard to sink. It's hard.
Well, that actually, that leads me a little bit into card combos, right? Because like we've talked a lot about combat and area majority, but like this is a card crafting game. And in our last game, I built a card that, if it had enough guns on it, would do extra damage whenever I went to a spot. And every time I battled, if I won, I would do extra damage. And that's actually why I went into port, sailed right into port with all the defenses to try and destroy you in that last turn, because I knew I was doing a minimum of 3 damage. Normally you do a minimum of 1 if you win, but like I had crafted this card that was punchy, and when the dust settled, I did like 7 damage to you. You only need 5 damage to win, to sink a ship, and I think your ship already had 2 on it. So like, I also felt that way. Like, oh, it's really hard to sink ships in this game. You just do 1 damage. But then if you start to put together ludicrous combos on cards, actually you can get crazy destroyers. But again, like, even if somebody come and crazy destroys you, you just lost like 5 points usually.
But you also might take damage. That's one of the other benefits. Is like, I might damage you.
You could have sunk me.
100%. But also, it still took you 2 turns, or it still took me having some damage. Like, it's not... One of the nice aspects is that it seems somewhat difficult to sink someone in 1 turn. Completely possible, but it seems
in the
somewhat
late game,
difficult. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm distracted because I'm trying to think of that card that you played, John. If I saw it and it specifically says you can't do damage to people in port.
It does. It does say that you don't do an extra damage when in port. But in general, I was still doing more than enough damage with that card.
Great. Super. Love that. Okay.
That is, however, how Nick hid from me, by the way, is because I made one of those cards, and then Nick was like, I'm gonna go hide in port, and the card literally is like, can't attack in port, which is probably a good thing, because if you don't like conflict in this game, if you just end your turn in port, you're pretty safe. There's a couple of mechanics that like protect you, and so you can kind of avoid it. Nevertheless, I really, really needed to sink him. Like, I wanted.
Well, what's cool too is to hide in port. You're probably going to suck at the game because you like want to go places to do things.
Yeah.
And if you're just doing it on those starting islands, that sucks. So the only way to do that and be successful is that you have to spend time getting sails on your ship. And I did put sails. I had sails on one of my cards, and I had sails on my ship as well. So I could like go out, do something, and then run away back home. And of course, the like one time that I didn't, you came and attacked me and didn't sink me. So it was fine. But you won the battle and like got your cool rewards for it. So yeah, it was legit. But John, I'm really glad you brought up the card crafting, because we spent all this time talking about the combat, and we spent all this time talking about the area majority. I think the combat like demands your attention, because when you walk by a table of someone with this, you're like, what's with the pirate ship on the table?
Yeah.
It demands your attention. Like,
It's very cool looking.
but to me, actually, the card crafting, the like Voltroning up each of your cards is the coolest part of this game.
100%.
It's awesome. And the reason that it's awesome is not card crafting in Mystic Vale is like, oh, neat. Like, you can build this little combo. This game has it on 2 axes, and that is brilliant. The 2 axes that I'm talking about here is you can go out and you can buy advancements, which slot under your card. You can have up to 3 advancements, and you get to level up 1 card every turn, which is like the base cards. It basically just like upgrades their action. So like the gunner starts off giving you some barrels. He doesn't even gun. And then he learns how to gun. And then he's awesome at gunning. And now he's the best in the world at gunning, right? Like,
yeah.
So you get these like opportunities to upgrade them and put the advancements on them. So you can build these like little combos that you're just like, oh, I've played, Captain Mega over here. I'm going to sail over to your place and like mess everything up. They've been talking, or John was just talking about like the violence combos, which certainly exist, but there are other combos that are really cool too. And like,
super passive, amazing combos.
Yeah, it was a 2-player game that I played with Anastasia where she's like, yeah, I have some cannons, but really what I could do is play like 1,000,000 cubes. So when I take this, I just conquer an entire island. And then like I had one where I like played it and it was like get 7 resources. And I was like, it's not even a combo. I'm just rich. Like really satisfying.
Yeah. Well, Anastasia, you made a crazy captain in our game.
Oh my God. I was so sad I didn't get to use this card more. He was
You used it
so
once, yeah.
cool. Yeah, he like, for the number, I don't remember exactly, but for the number of, there's a lot of like, for the number of icons that you have of this, which is just to your point, Nick, like, I kept buying cannons in that game because the game I played with you, because I had this card that let me that like benefited my strategy of playing defensively. Like, let me buy cannons to then just do area majority. And so I just
cannons.
Yeah, I just happened to have cannons on this card. But really what it did was let me take over islands. And I loved that. And with you, John, yeah, I had this captain who, if he just sailed through islands, he would just pick up things. They would just produce. We haven't even talked about that, but the islands produce resources, and that's part of the pick up and deliver. But they would just produce onto my ship, which really would have benefited me also, like doing a bosun strategy, which is like how you upgrade your ships, which is something that you guys both did a ton. Like in each of my 2-player games with you guys, you both upgraded your ships. It's something I have to admit I haven't fully explored. But I'm curious because it felt like I actually started to feel jealous. I was like, my ship feels so lame compared to your guys' ships. But you both started in like, I want to go on that strategy.
Yeah, I mean, you have to spend stuff in this game in a lot of ways. You buy advancements, slot in your cards, make your cards better. Or if you go into a bosun strategy and upgrade your ship itself, you spend stuff to upgrade your ship. And actually, when I had that one game, that second play where I went hard on the bosun and I just upgraded my ship a bunch, I felt a lot of grass is greener moments because I was like, I'm never getting advancements. Like, I'm just not picking up these cards. I'm not upgrading my deck. But what I was doing was permanently upgrading my ship, which gave me extra sails, and then I put a bunch of guns on there, and then the rest is history, like I said before. But when the dust settled on that game and we like counted up the advancements, I had 8, I think, and you had like 15, like almost twice as many. But that's because I sunk my stuff into those other things. And while my ship was, guns out like crazy, you had combos like that captain. I mean, like, you didn't just sail through islands and produce. You had another effect on that captain that doubled the effect of one of your benefits.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
So like, it wasn't just that you had like this one good aspect. You built this combo. You slotted a third thing in that captain. I don't even know what it did, but it was good. But I remember on that last turn, you sailed your captain around and made like 12 points. Moving with one card play, which is a lot when the endgame score is like 90. Yeah,
move it more. It would have been double that. Like, I was short on sales or something. Yeah, it was a really cool card.
But at the same time, like we talked about this afterwards, I won that game, even though I felt grass is greener, like, oh, my cards are way less interesting than Anastasia's. But that's just because there's a consistency to upgrading your ship of just like permanent sail, permanent cannon. It's hard to discount that and be like, oh, well, that's not good, because clearly that is, but it's not flashy. It's not a flashy combo.
I think grass is greener is actually part of the good design of the different professions. What are crewmates that are in the game, right? Because when we first played, it was like, oh my God, upgrading the Buccaneer is insane. Why wouldn't you upgrade the Buccaneer? Like, you need to put lots of cubes places. And then we tried again.
A cube,
it was
a cube hose.
Okay, hold on. Upgrading the gunner is clearly what you need to do because like they go hard, and then you're like, yeah, okay, fine. Upgrading crew can't be good, Ken. It's like both Anastasia and I have tried it now. We're like, all right, you get pretty rich when you upgrade your crew. This is pretty cool too. Like,
yeah.
There's only one card that I haven't been convinced that upgrading the deckhand is cool, and I'm sure that we'll play a game where I'm like, all right, I take it back. Deckhand is awesome because all of them feel cool in their own different way. And the ones that I mentioned aren't even like the spicy one where it's like build a ton of buildings, or I actually think upgrading your ship is cool because I like just seeing it like all like specced out. I think it's awesome. But yeah, I mean, they all of them seem great, and that I think is that's exciting design. I think it's a common mistake in Euro games that it's like you can do this or you can do this, but they kind of feel samey. And in this one, it's like, oh, I wish I could be doing that, and the other player says, I wish I could be doing what you're doing. That's good.
Yeah, it is really good.
In the very first play, when you and Anastasia were going nuts on the island and I was kind of hanging out on the side, Anastasia, you upgraded your card that let you construct buildings. I've yet to build. I think I've only built like one building in my entirety of my 2 games. But in that first game, you built, actually both the games that we played, you built a ton of buildings. And like they're defensive, like get the heck away from here. They're production, they like make more stuff when you go there. And I felt that grass is greener. Like I wish my islands were littered with buildings, but you know, I was doing other things instead. And like I want to go over there and take over that island, but holy cow, there's a freaking fortress and a garrison, and I'm gonna go somewhere else.
I mean, I love that. I completely agree with you guys. Like I love that about this game, that there feels like there's so many different paths to take. Like while I did buildings in my first 2 games, and the game I played yesterday with Nick, I didn't build buildings at all. I was like, I don't want buildings this game. But I remember that first game, and I do this a lot with a game that has so many complexities. The first time I play a game, I sort of pick a couple of things, and then I just do that. So like I didn't explore, I didn't go deep in the ocean that first game. I just like stayed near port and like pick up and deliver the whole game. And then I built buildings to try.
You tried to build a wall.
I tried to build a wall to cut you guys off.
Like, yeah, you controlled the close islands, and then you like built garrisons and forts on
just
almost all of them.
Guys, it's just defensive.
See, that's the funny part about this is I was like, I wasn't aggressive at all in that game. I was just defensive. But you could be
just tried to wall us out into the ocean.
That's true. Come on through here. But it's nice because those things, like, they force people to fight with your island instead of with you. Like, there's just, and you protect your island. It really allows you to protect your sandcastle pretty well. But that was really interesting. But I do think I think, Nick, it's after you and I played our first 2-player game, we looked at this board. So you start with 12, everybody starts with the same 12 card deck, the same 12 people, if you will. And you, like Nick said, you can upgrade them every turn, which is so much fun. The choice, and you do it between turns. So even though we've touched on this, but there is a ton of downtime in this game. Like we thought it would go away. It doesn't really go away. There's so much to think about. You just have more to think about the more you get to know the game. And even in 2 players, it's still a ton of downtime. But you're always thinking about things. So you're sitting there like, thinking, what card do I want to upgrade? And you get to do that in between turns. So you have a lot of it just creates a really nice choice in addition to the card crafting and putting things on your cards and building them up. So when we were looking at these upgrades, and Nick, you touched on this, so it's like, see these cards that, like the crew card that just seems so lame, and then to realize when you get it to level 4, you can put barrels on your ship, you can put them on the port, you can do the abilities that are unexpected when you get them up, and then the choices that you make when you're starting the game to be like, okay, well, this is at least how I've been playing, which has not been successful, so don't take this as advice. I've been sitting there being like, what cards do I want to upgrade this game, right? And like, what strategy am I going to kind of go at? And you kind of get to choose. Like, the game can dictate a little bit because there's the randomness of what you're going to draw. Like, what's in your starting hand is somewhat going to dictate. I know Nick was like, I want to do a bosun strategy, and then the bosun was at the bottom of his deck. Like, so like he was like, I guess I got to do something else. Yeah. And, like John said, ship upgrades are permanent. Like, they're a thing, but that's still a strategy you have to pick, or a card that you have to choose to upgrade so that you can do that. But those are things that you get every turn, but there's still a fair amount of randomness. Like I could upgrade this massive super captain and he never comes out. I mean, the drawing is a factor here.
I mean, you only have 12 cards.
He will eventually come out.
He will eventually come out. And
But he might hide that one turn where you really freaking need him.
The game does a good job though of like some of the islands let you have a bigger hand size, and
That's
some
true,
of the
yeah.
some of the cards let you draw an extra card, and like while you control, like, see, there's a lot of ways to control your deck, which is just so much fun. And then pick, like I said, kind of pick the strategies that you kind of want to go at. I've done a lot of like just holding a card for 4 turns and like just upgrading it to level 4, just like in my hand, and then playing it just to kind of get the benefits of that going out. And I love that. It reminds me a lot of Arc Nova. I know I've already kind of mentioned this, but there's this feeling of, what do you want to do this game? Like, what are you going to upgrade? What you can't do everything. You can't upgrade everything. Like, what are you going to choose? And like, what are you going to go hard on? And you can do different things, and there's just so much to explore. And I think that's so cool.
Yeah. I do. You mentioned 2 of the things that I'm so hyped right now. This conversation makes me want to play the game again.
Yeah,
but
we should just stop.
I do want to take some wind out of the sails here. Pun completely intended. Of 2 of the things that you mentioned in there that are my 2 holdups for this game. One is the downtime.
Yep.
The downtime is long,
Legitimate.
and yes, you have to pay attention to what other people are doing on their turn, but it's also like I'm waiting for it to be my turn. Like,
yeah.
It's not the kind of thing where like paying attention during someone else's turn really adds like a ton of value to my gameplay experience. And unless you're attacking me, I'm not interacting really with what you're doing. And we've talked about this in earlier episodes, but like generally of the 3 of us, I'm a pretty quick player. And there are times in this game where I'm like, I'm playing these and I know I'm going to do this, but then hold on, let me figure out how to sequence it. And I can feel myself being like, make a decision. Everyone's waiting on you right now. Like, you gotta go, like, move the boat, drop the cube, and like move on with your life. But if I move this way, it's like, shut up, keep going. Like, that like cycle is very real.
And then you're like, oh wait, but there's an advancement I could buy. Crap.
Right.
Yeah.
Reset.
I don't think I've ever played a game with you before, Nick, where you were like, I think I'm thinking slower than you in this game. Like, I don't think that's ever happened. And I was like,
yeah. In the last game that we played, because Anastasia was playing primarily a fighting strategy, and I was like, all right, well, I'm going to hide from her. How could I hide from her and accomplish what I want to do? And she's like, I'm just waiting for you. Come on out.
And then you never did.
Yeah,
so
it was rough. It was rough. I felt the pressure of that time. I know the 2 of you mentioned it too, so I mean, I know everyone feels this way, right?
So we played all of our games on Tabletop Simulator up to this point. We don't actually own a copy of this game, and the Tabletop Simulator mod that exists is quite good. But I remember in our first play, at one point, I took my turn, and then Nick's taking his turn, and then Anastasia comes back, and she's like, sorry. And we're like, what do you mean sorry? She's like, oh, I left. I got a snack. I talked to my partner.
I went to the bathroom.
I came back. I assumed it was my turn, and we're like, no.
I was gone for a while.
And the other thing too is when someone steps away, right? She comes back. It's like, what did you do? It's like, oh, I sailed over here and bought this card, right? Like, it's not like even at the end of the day, it's like I did this and then I conquered the 4. It doesn't like go on and on and on.
What you doing? Oh, I bought that card.
You're trying to figure out how to sequence it appropriately, and even after, right? Like 3 play, like my 3rd play was my slowest of this game by a long shot.
Yeah, and I played twice, and my 2nd play was slower as well. And I commented to Anastasia, I'm like, I thought I'd be faster, but like, oh, I'm sorry.
Like, you do get faster at some things, and you do grok the game more, and you are spending less time being like, okay, guys, let's stop and let's look up a rule. Like, you do get faster, and I like, that's good. But like I said, it just gives you more to think about because suddenly you're aware of so much more, and you realize you have to plot. And this actually kind of goes back to like, I think my major critique of the game. I will say I had some smaller critiques. Like I was like, oh, it's not really a deck builder. And that all has kind of been washed away the more I played it. The more I've realized I have control over my deck more. I did more advancements, and I realized, like a lot of the little things, like you do with a lot of games. The game shows you why it was that way.
Made those decisions.
Yeah. It reminded me of Anna, where we, like, after our first play, we talked about it for like 2 hours, and we were like, all these things we want to change. And then the more we played it, I was like, it's perfect. Don't change it, in my opinion. But in this one, I do have 1.5 major complaints. And for me, my biggest issue is the end game. Because of everything you guys are talking about, how much thinking can get into it, especially as you keep going. Like, sure, the first few turns, you don't have to think that hard. And even as you're playing in the middle, like, you're starting to kind of feel like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And it doesn't feel like every decision super matters. Like, it does matter, but like, you can kind of flow with it. But when you get to the end, this game ends super abruptly. And this is my like half criticism, which is actually I think they're called achievements, right? There's achievements and advancements, but achievements, which are essentially like, I don't know, a number of end game. It's just like Scythe or Beyond the Sun. They're goals. Yeah. And when you meet enough of them, the game ends, right? But the game just ends. Like, when someone meets them, you get one more turn. It doesn't matter how much you've been building. It doesn't matter that maybe you just drew the worst cards in your deck. It's over. You've got one turn. There's no way to draw more. There's no way to like fix it. There's no way to adapt. It ends. And as a benefit for the player that ended the game, they get displacing their cubes costs double for you. Attacking them is harder for you. Like, it makes it really hard. So when you get to this end point, you've done all of this thinking, all of this plotting, and if you weren't like super careful paying attention to whether or not you think someone else is going to end it, at this point I've never ended it despite trying, your game can just kind of like fall on its face in this like last moment, and it just leaves
end in a whimper.
End in a whimper, exactly. After you played this amazing 2-hour game and had this fantastic experience, and then I've had, I'd say, 2 out of the 4 games, it left me with a bad taste in my mouth. It's not because I lost. I'm great at losing. Playing against Nick, you become so good at losing games. It doesn't even phase you. It's not about the losing. It's just about that feeling of like, when these scores are so close, it comes down to a couple of points. And like, Nick and I played yesterday, and I had so much regret about what I'd done in my second to last turn, not realizing that Nick was going to end it. Not pacing that well, not because he threw out like 3 advancements in one turn and just
that's the thing. The game ends when somebody has 4 achievements,
and you can do them all at once.
It's very, very easy to do 2 on a turn, and it's somewhat easy to do 3 in the late game because you kind of get so close to so many of them.
Exactly, and then I was just like, and so he like had to go, and I was like, he was like, "Are you gonna finish playing?" And I was like, "No, I'm just gonna bitch about what I did last turn for 10 minutes." Because I'm so pissed at myself that I didn't plan correctly, like just for my brain, because there's so much you can control, and it's such a Euro to get to that moment and be like, it just all fell on its face. It felt so bad, and the game is so good. So anyways, I'm curious what you guys think of that.
I mean, you and I were talking about it a little bit afterwards too, and I agree. I think that a lot of 4X games, or a lot of like area control or territory control type games, they struggle with the end game because the scoring system of controlling stuff at the end is so significant that like getting to go last is huge. And I've not seen a ton of, especially 4X style games, find good solutions to this problem. They tend to not be elegant. They tend to feel abrupt. And I think part of it is, right, you've built this boat, you have all these upgraded crew, there's all these islands, and the game's over. Like the game has to end at some point, and like what do you determine as like good or bad at the end of the game is up to the design, right? And I would not say that Dead Reckoning has solved this problem. I'm not as frustrated as Anastasia is by the end game experience. But maybe
it's because you've ended the game.
The person who ends the game. But even still, like I think that even if someone else ended it on me, like I generally would have a sense of like, at least at this point, I feel like I have a sense of what the arc of the game is going to be like. That when it ends, I'm not going to be like completely befuddled by it. But I do see what you're saying. I do think that it's valid.
So I played it twice, and I ended the game in one of those 2 plays. And I'll admit, it's kind of thrilling to do that. And even though in that second play, I will admit it was telegraphed. Like one of the achievements is upgrade your boat enough times. And in fact, I had 3 out of the 4, and Anastasia thought it was going to be your last turn because you assumed I had the card that let me upgrade my ship. but then I didn't draw it. And
Yeah.
so you actually took like what you thought was your second to last turn as a setup, and then you were like, oh, actually, surprise, you get another second to last turn, and you were able to set that up. And I think it really the vibe of it just totally depends on if you're surprised. Like you didn't end it, but you weren't surprised in that game.
No.
In the first game we were, but also in the first game we didn't know what we were doing. I remember Nick went away for just a couple of minutes, and you and I were just chatting, and we're like, I feel like we're like 2/3 the way through the game, and then Nick came back to do his turn and literally ended the game.
Yeah,
Like,
on that turn. 100%.
we
Yeah.
we
I
were
was like-
super wrong.
I was like, yeah, this is really fun. We got like another 30 minutes here. No, I'm going to end it on
Nope.
You know, the amount of times that Nick says that and it just fills me with dread. He says this thing, he sits down and he's like, all right, I think I'm going to end it. And I'm like, what?
You know what's really funny is I know that I generate anxiety for people when I do that. So that's part of the reason why I say it, because I think that if I went through executing it
Doesn't
and then
work.
the like dawning realization of it ending is worse. So that's why I like announce it is coming. Like it's
Yeah.
like a portent of the future.
I'm getting,
Yeah,
you
and
know,
it's-
one day we'll have merch and it's going to have that. I think I'm going to end it. It's going to be one of the shirts. The last thing that I kind of want to say, like, on this whole endgame thing is that the achievements, they're the same every game. And I really like how the achievements are handled in like Beyond the Sun, which for me, that end game I prefer to this, because not only are the achievements variable, so they promote different strategies a little bit. There's some of them are the same, but you also, if I remember correctly, you finish the round and then play another one. And that's really what I wish happened here, is that you would just either finish the round or like everybody else gets 2 more turns and you get 1 more. And I know, like, I'm sure there are many reasons why that isn't the case, but it just feels like it allows someone who maybe played a strategy that doesn't play into the achievements, because up to this point, 4 games in, despite all of my efforts, I have never felt like I was in a good position to get 4 achievements, because I haven't done the build ship upgrade strategy, which I feel like you need to focus half your game on to do well. In the 2-player game, exploring is very, very tight, and I keep not being the one to get to it. There's just like, I haven't been in a position to satisfy all those achievements. Half of them are battling, which aren't that good in 2-player, and they're the same every game. So you are somewhat bound to them, and that's my like other half criticism, is just that those achievements, I don't want to look at them and feel this like trapped feeling. I know I complain about that a lot, where I'm like, there's a sameness to them. And I don't think you need to, but it feels that way when the end game, when triggered by someone else, can feel so disadvantageous to me not being the one to trigger it. So I don't know. We'll see how more plays and getting to know the feel of the timing is. And like John said, in the game where I wasn't taken by surprise, I was a lot more prepared, and I had a bonkers last turn. So, you know, I'll see how that goes. But that's still probably my biggest criticism with the game.
I do want to talk about one other thing that I don't even know that I would call it a criticism, because it's got good and bad parts to it. It's just something that I think a person needs to be aware of when they're stepping into this game, is the randomness of this game. So I'm going to give the randomness in this game a compliment. We're going to start with the compliment side of it. The compliment side of it is that the randomness is very hidden, which means that you don't feel like the game is screwing you. You don't feel like things just didn't pan out your way. If the cards that are really good kind of are at the bottom of your deck, then what happens is you like end up like kind of like redrawing on a reshuffle, and you essentially get to execute those cards fewer times over the course of the game. And if you're not paying attention, you're just like, okay, I drew my cards, everything is good, so everything gets to do something. But if Anastasia's playing a game where she gets to do good things and I get to repeatedly do very good things, I'm going to come out on top. So that information, again, that randomness is not in your face, so I don't think that it feels quite as bad. But when I'm sitting there and analyzing it, I can't turn my brain off for that. And I'm like, no, my super card's at the bottom of the deck again. Like
Yeah.
it does stomp on it. It can stomp on it.
Particularly given
Yeah.
how much of a deep, thinky, plotting Eurogame this can feel like. I mean, you feel like you really can sit there and calculate your turns and plot, you know, the chances of these things happening. Given how much randomness, like you said, is like within this game, it surprises me how much I step back from it and think, oh yeah, this is just like a really deep engine building Euro. It's not an engine builder.
Dagger.
Don't poke the bear. I mean, we've discussed a little bit about ways to kind of get around that. Maybe some subtle things like you have a base hand size of 6 and you have a base draw of 4. So that means kind of a typical thing to do is to kind of keep 2 cards back that might not be good right now. And when you keep those back, your deck is functionally smaller. And if you have a hand size of 9, like Anastasia had near the end of our last game, and you have 12 cards in your deck, like there's a situation where you could sequester a whole bunch of cards essentially in your enormous hand, and then just play your really good ones, and then just cycle through your deck over and over again.
That's also something that might be more possible in like a 2-player game, because a lot of your ability to augment your deck has to do with the islands you control. And I think you're right, Nick. Like I really want to play this at 4, but I sort of am dreading playing it 4, not just because of the epic downtime. It probably takes 6 hours like Eclipse. Just kidding, it won't. But not just because of the downtime, but because of the lack of control. I mean, that's just a theme in general with these games, right? Like when you play or with gaming in general, when you play a 2-player game, you have more ability to control that randomness. And when you play with higher player counts in a tight field, like you have less of it.
So I've played this less than both of you at this point, but with my only 2 plays. But it's been really exciting, kind of like watching these games happen, seeing like the session reports of the ones that you guys have been playing, typing the one out for the one that we did. This game has been really fun. Like when you're taking your turn and piecing stuff together, I find it so satisfying, even if it does become a little bit of an analysis paralysis hole. And I kind of thought I was going to like this game. I remember when I made my video for this like a year and a half ago, I remember thinking this game looks cool. And I'm glad to see that I've really enjoyed it, even though, the downtime and whatnot has been lower. I think the one thing that shines is pretty interesting for me. I mean, lots of things shine is pretty interesting, but one thing that kind of sum up my feelings is how this is like a stealth Euro in a lot of ways. We've talked about the randomness. We just talked about the randomness, and that definitely exists here. But also, there's a lot of Euro-y decisions, even if the decision is, do I go into Harbor and try to punch Anastasia in the face, which doesn't sound like a very Euro-y decision, but actually it kind of is, because am I giving too many points there, and also am I giving up points over here and there? And one thing I've found with this game, with my couple of plays, is that I need to kind of force myself to step back from the crunching and just do the fun thing. Yeah, because frequently the fun thing is actually the right thing to do. I've mentioned it many times, but that last turn of our last game where I sunk you in the harbor, I had 2 options. I could go to the harbor and sink you, or I could have run around and taken second place on like 5 islands or 4 islands. And that would have been worth a bunch of points. And I remember saying, you know what? One of these options is fun, and one of these options might actually get me more points. I'm going to do the fun thing. I ended up winning. Maybe if I'd done the Euro-y thing of just taking second place on a bunch of islands, maybe I would have won by more. I don't know. But I leaned into the fun thing, and I had fun. And, ultimately that is what you're trying to do here. But I can't help but wonder if the AP-ness of it is just because there is so many Euro-esque type of things that you can crunch. And, in future plays, I just got to keep telling myself, like, look at your hand of cards. What's the funnest option? Do it. Don't crunch. Don't crunch. Don't crunch. And I'll probably enjoy it even more. And I've enjoyed it quite a lot already.
I gotta admit, like I was kind of skeptical on it. It's like an hour teach. There was like a lot. Even after our first play, I was like, okay, like that was a good game. But I thought that this was going to be like a passable one. In that, like, I really enjoyed myself. Maybe we'd play it again. It brought up a lot of conversation. But I didn't expect it to be one with some staying power. I didn't expect it to be like, hey, do you want to go play Dead Reckoning? And we have games like that, that we just kind of, we always go back to. Anno is one of them. Holler Tau is one of them. Yep. Beyond the Sun is one of them too. Like there are games where it's like, oh great, you want to just play something? Like let's just break that out. And I don't know. Like I don't know. We're gonna have to touch base on this in a couple months and see how much we played it. But Nick is right. Like I like playing a game like this like 4 times in a week. Like that means I like it. Like I just that's beyond.
You weren't doing that for podcast.
No,
research.
that's That's beyond I want to explore it and give a well-rounded opinion for this episode. That's like, I don't know. I'm really curious to see, like, if this is going to become, we sort of call it a game we jam. Like, is this going to be one of those games? Because it's just fun. It's just fun. All
Yeah.
of my complaints aside, it's just fun. And to see it improve, when we first played it 2-player, I was like, Nick and I were both, that was the first time we played it 2-player was with each other. And I think we both were like, I don't know if this is a good 2-player game. But then I played it with John 2-player, then we played it again 2-player. And I was like, it's solid. I'm having a great time. Like it's just fun. And there's like little tweaks, especially for the randomness. We didn't even talk about the randomness in the advancements that come out in the cards for the card crafting. Yeah, do I want to see more merchant ships? Maybe would I thin the deck a little bit for 2-player? Sure. Like, I don't know. Yeah, like I've got some complaints. Is there less fighting options in 2-player? Yeah. But for a game that does seem to be getting a little bit faster. I think we played it in under 2 hours yesterday, but like a game that just like you could sit down and just gonna like dive into and just have so much fun. I don't know if it's got staying power. I don't know if I'm gonna buy it. I don't even know how I feel about it, but I've just been having fun with it, and that is great. That's good for me.
Yes.
The staying power question is so good. I don't know what I'm like in a month with this game, right? Like us having this conversation, I'm as like hyped for playing the game, I feel like, as in the times that we were playing the game. And that's making me think that part of what I really enjoy about this game is sort of the components that are very amazing about it. Like the card crafting system, the upgrading, the Voltroning. It's so cool. Like I really, really like it. And the fighting is like, it's a nice novel way to resolve fighting where it feels like even when you're, the person who's just getting like beat on, there's like something to be had there. And I think that's cool too. So those are really, really nifty. But I don't love the scoring of the area control stuff. The like game, it can run a little bit too long for what it is. Like when I describe like what it is at the course over the game that I accomplish, I do wonder like if certain systems in the game, if they were not there, if it would still be just as good. Like if we took this one little thing out here or there, I don't know. Like I it's tough to say for sure. But I think what you said, Anastasia, about like it's just fun. Like I've been enjoying playing it. I want to go jam it again right now, and I'll have to see like, is this something that we play in a month and 3 months? Because it's been surprising, the games that have lasted and the games that haven't lasted, and this one's definitely a contender.
Yeah,
it is. Well, this was a fun conversation too. I think that definitely adds into the enjoyment of like what games we play is the one that fosters such intense discussion. I mean, man, I do like talking about this stuff.
Absolutely. And so grab lunch and then we'll play. Everyone good?
Jam
Free
again.
afternoon.
All right, I think that's going to bring this episode to a close. Thanks everybody for listening. I hope you found this enjoyable. We'd love to hear what you think about Dead Reckoning. If you've tried it, if you're curious to try it, please leave comments. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, there is a YouTube version. You can find a link to it in the description of this, and please leave comments over there. And yeah, thanks again for watching.